Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. And we're going to work on that inspire resilience part today with my guest, MaryCay Durrant. Did I say your last name right, MaryCay?
You did, yes.
Good, good. Thank you so much for being with me. It's lovely to have you on.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and so inspired by the work that you do. So thank you for having me.
Sure thing, sure thing. And I know we've got, I looked through your bona fides and you've got a lot of things after your name, a lot of letters after your name. We'll put all of those in the show notes. And so where would you like to start? Where do we want to start this discussion? Because I know we have a lot of ground we can cover.
Well, maybe a place to start would be even like why you're having me on a podcast that really serves healthcare. I mean, it's interesting to me because I didn't start my career in the healthcare arena. My father was a pediatrician, and watching him, I remember thinking that I wasn't sure I had the courage or the character for the hard work that healthcare takes. And I could tell so many stories about watching him in the work that he did. And I just think that I feel very blessed to have found my way back into serving healthcare after having been in the world of business for so long, and to be able to take some of the lessons I learned and saw from him and that I learned in the somewhat unusual upbringing I had to help bring that resilience that you talked about to people who are serving people in great need.
There are so many different ways to serve, and you seem like you've found your niche. So how did you get to this work?
Well, I did have a long corporate career, and in my sort of mid to late 30s, I found myself feeling overworked, dissatisfied, had many of the trappings of success. But on the inside, my heart felt empty. And I missed a lot of the great, like, zest for life and care and community service that had been such a part of my upbringing. And in the middle of that, I sort of, in the way of life kind of shakes us off our axis, not certainly in the way of yours, but I found my eyes opened in new ways by finding myself unexpectedly on the plains of Colorado on a hot July day with 5 women I didn't know and an instructor and a herd of horses around me. And the woman who was leading the workshop said, "Horses never lie. Humans, we lie all the time, most terribly to ourselves." And that was a moment that woke me back up to something that I had spent a lot of time learning about as a child, was the power of nature and how nature does always tell the truth, that it's always moving towards both cooperation and resilience. And after that week, I started to go back to the workplaces I was in and realize that those qualities of nature were what was most missing in the workplace. And I started to realize that I think that's the core reason that we have such low engagement and that people get burned out at work, is that we're not actually honoring our natural design. We're not honoring the spirit of life that goes through each of us. And if we tend to that part of us as leaders and in the way we design our workplaces, we would create places where human beings would thrive in the same way we see nature thriving, even in adverse situations. And so that started me back on this journey of starting to bring that kind of work to the world.
So it was the encounter with the horses that really, I don't want to say triggered you, but inspired you, I suppose, influenced you to try to work more nature in. My wife and I have both in the last 6 months or so gotten into horseback riding. For her, she's had lessons as a kid and such. For me, it's my first time being on a horse since childhood, and I love what you said, that horses don't lie. There's so much that we can learn from just spending time with these magnificent beasts that my horse trainer very much claims, and I believe that horses are rather telepathic creatures that can channel what we're feeling and what we need and intuit. I just think that's super cool.
Well, and I love that you're getting to experience that, you and your wife. And I think it's why they're being used in ever increasing number of healing modalities. And I know something you talk about a lot is the gift of presence. I've even heard you call it exquisite presence that we can give another being. And one of the things that's so beautiful in some of the more therapeutic or leadership work is that the way the horses be present with us is so quiet and so calm and no stories running in their heads. So that rare gift that when we get to be in the presence of someone who has that calm, congruent energy that's as true on the outside as it is on the inside, they invite us to remember that part of ourselves so that we can cultivate that inner calm and bring that presence to the places that we serve in our work.
We just stay more engaged and connected to our why, right?
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I've worked with executive physicians and with all kinds of people in healthcare who say their capacity to remain present and in that compassionate heart after spending time with the horses grows exponentially because they see it modeled to them and they receive that attention and then desire to give that to others.
So I read this morning a bit about, I think it was calm, purpose, and joy. Do I have that right?
Calm, purpose, and joy as part of what we can bring.
Yeah. Yes, yes. That was part of a modality maybe or a model.
Yes, well, there is very much a model of how I think about work and what if we redefined work. I love what Cahill Gibran says, that work is love made visible. You know, it is to take the very breath of our spirit and weave something with joy and purpose. And so the model that I orient people to is, first of all, like waking up in the morning and saying, how do you orient yourself? And every sentient being in nature orients themselves all the time, and it's how they show up with purpose. It's how they go into their parasympathetic nervous system and stay calm. And so we so often do that. You know, we hop out of bed when the alarm goes off, we grab our phone, we, rush around to take care of the kids. And so just pausing for a moment, putting our feet on the floor of wherever we are, and knowing which way is north even. Where am I headed? And taking a couple deep breaths and saying, who am I? How am I? Where am I? And just those couple of seconds can orient us. If we do it in the morning, if we do it before a big meeting or a conversation with a patient or someone we're caring for, so that beginning step of the orienting puts us in a present mind state and helps us be calm so we get in touch with and are oriented towards our purpose. And then, go ahead.
No, I was just as you're saying this about orienting. I love that. I was taught orientation and mobility within a year or two after losing my sight in Denver, Colorado, at the Colorado Center for the Blind, and that's where I learned how to get around by using all of the sound clues around me and being able to use your cardinal directions to know that when you're headed north, if you make a right, you're headed east. If you make another right, you're headed south. And if you make a left, you're headed back east. So it took a lot of orientation for me. So whenever you're talking about this practice of getting up in the morning and just orienting, what did you say? Where am I?
Yeah.
How
So
am
who
I? Who am I?
and
Where am
who
I?
Yeah. Who am I? So who am I today? And think about that through the work you do. Who am I? I'm generosity. Like that was how I oriented this morning, thinking that I was going to get to be with your amazing community and you. And so orienting to generosity, who I am. So having who am I? Where am I? Where am I in the world? Where am I in my, am I in my head? Am I in my heart? So you can answer those questions so many ways. Who am I? Where am I? How am I? And my how am I was pretty good until maybe my microphone didn't work. But then, what I did is I oriented again in that moment. I'm like, where am I? I am with Marcus, who I'm so inspired by, and with his community of people who care about bringing compassion to healthcare. So I brought myself back. So even though this is very new for me, I could be present with you in your community. And I just find if we can orient, which is something that if there's a moment of tension in nature, the animal allows themselves the energy to move through them, which is also something we're not very good at. And then they pause and reorient so they can be back in whatever purpose is there.
We're talking about this, and it's reminding me of a book that my counselor just recommended to me, uh, and I would have to go get the title, but it's about somatic healing and how in nature observing ducks or dogs or birds that get their literal feathers ruffled, and how they are able to shake off that negative energy. And I would have to go get the title of that book, but that's what I'm being reminded of as you're talking about these things. We get the opportunity to shake it off and come back to what is likely our true north.
Absolutely. And what's so beautiful about what you're saying is that all of these beings in nature, they don't live in the narratives or stories. I work with a CEO who says the most important story is the one we're telling ourselves. And so sometimes we get locked in those stories, and our culture tells us maybe it's not okay to ruffle our feathers or to run around the meeting room to shake off energy the way a dog might.
Right.
But in reality, that is often the healthiest thing we can do. Because as you know from your work, when we suppress that energy or put it in our bodies, we get sick.
Right.
Or it gets in the way of our ability to actually be present because that narrative is now between us and the people we're trying to engage with. And so if we can learn, and what I love about the orienting practice is for me, sometimes what I start to see when I orient in the like, how am I can see a story might be in my space that's in the way of my actually fulfilling my purpose that day. And then I can move my body. So I love this idea of somatics, like our bodies are such a gift to us being able to live our purpose. And so to integrate them into who we are, not just think there's something we drag around with us, is such an important part of being our whole true nature.
Tell me about the WORK model.
Yeah, so we've been talking about the first part of it, which is the orienting, waking up and orienting to where am I, who am I, how am I? That's the first part of it, the W, waking up. And orienting. So the waking up and then orienting, W and O. R is really about reimagining partnering. And what I mean by that is so much in our world, we're taught pull yourself up by the bootstraps, be strong and independent, do it yourself. And as you know, in all of the work you do and in your own life, that is actually a lie. And that lie is actually contributing so much to our burnout. That everything in nature that is connected grows. When things are connected in nature, they find resilience. So the R is reimagining partnering. And we think that we have relationships, right? That, oh, my relationship is difficult or my relationship is really great. But really what nature shows us is all we have are moments of relating. So in that R, we get to reimagine, how am I relating in this moment? How am I relating in this moment? If I notice I'm trying to assert power and get my status because I feel uncomfortable in a situation with maybe someone who I think has more power than me in a challenge we're trying to solve at work, in that moment, I might be showing up in a way that's adversarial or just transactional, which is insufficient for the purpose that we're committed to. So in that reimagining partnering, I practice partnership. And what's so great about that is like, there's my part and there's not my part. And if we
Okay,
can,
explain that to me. There's your part, and then there's not your part.
yeah, so we so often are trying to do our part and make sure everybody else is doing their part. And if I'm doing over there trying to get your part working or figuring out somebody else's part, I've actually left my space and am no longer present. Right? So if I can get, my part is to know what I need. My part is to be able to ask for what I need from you, for the accountabilities I'm counting on you for. But there's my part and then there's not my part. everything else. And what that also starts to give us access to is the magic and wonder that happens when we start to tap into other people's greatness. Because often what we can imagine of another person, or what we can imagine of a group of people that we're working with, if we're truly operating cooperatively, is often too small for what can get created.
So are we on to K then?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to
So,
hear it. I love
so
this.
the K is to just keep nourishing what matters. So knowing what matters for what I need to be myself, knowing what matters to bring the best out in you as my partner or someone I might be working with. So really attending to that, for example, in a forest, the mycelium that is under the ground is constantly communicating and nourishing every other part of the forest. The trees take from their overflow, they wrestle with enough, and they take from their overflow and offer to other trees, even trees of different types, other kinds of plants. And so this knowing to nourish, keep nourishing what matters for the health of the ecosystem, for the purpose or team that we're up to. And being able to tell the truth back all the way to those horses about what our needs are, and to be able to declare what enough is so that we can then offer our overflow to the good that we're a shared commitment to.
I like that. I like that. I mean, and we all have overflow, right? Because if we're just kind of metaphysically bringing this in, we can also, I don't want to say afford, but it's not something that we're giving up of our own. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Apparently I'm going to have to put a big space in here because my brain is blanking on the word that I'm looking for. Synergistic, I suppose, is one of the words.
Yeah.
If we're giving that out, it keeps coming back, and vice versa, right? The opposite of that is also true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that goes back to, are we living in that idea of, are we partnering with the universe itself, with nature, with life itself? And I think this is what's so beautiful about this idea of, if I have claimed enough, I have enough resources, I have enough breath in this moment, I have enough time to help with this project. If I wrestle with enough, then I give from my overflow. And you and I both know that the return on energy that comes back from me from that sharing, it gives more to me than what I have given out.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Always. And so this is again how that resiliency works. If I give what is mine to give, if I know my part, and I really am thoughtful and conscious about what's my part to give, and to be willing, like the trees that fall off the leaf, to say that used to be my part. I had a part when I was in the corporate world. There was a time that came to an end. And so, like in nature, we see things have a life cycle. We let things go. We come back in and we give what is really now ours to give. And so often in organizations, once we find someone who can be accountable for that, frontline nurse or whatever that role is, we never want that to change. But what if we could tell the truth about what's helping us become our potential, helping us grow, what's returning energy to us? And in so doing that, we actually create a really vibrant ecosystem that lets some things fall away and let new things come to life.
Do you feel like most leaders that you work with are open to this idea? I suppose if you're working with leaders, they are open to education and learning. But I don't always feel like every leader is ready to quite open that door. How do
Yes.
you get past that initial resistance?
It's interesting. I have gotten to the point that if somebody says, I think that that's a bunch of hooey and, don't want to do it, I say, well, when your system isn't working anymore, the sort of manufactured model, push people till the end, kind of the optimizing humans like machines, when that model's not working, let's talk. Because I think that, what I find is the people who say, I believe there's got to be a better way. I believe there's a way where I don't get burned out and where I'm not burning out my people. And I'm open to trying something different. And I had an executive say, we did some work in nature and with the horses with their team. And she said, I thought this was going to be something that we got a little bit of rest and reprieve from our work. What I didn't realize is that in 15 minutes, I would transform who I am. And I can no longer unsee the truth of our true nature and how nature's models help us create better workplaces. And so I think you're right. Not everyone's ready for it, but the people who are ready for it, I believe, are going to create these oasis islands of great workplaces who over time, I like to look at nature's sort of sacred pace, right? Everything has a time that grows. I really believe that over time, people will say, how are they creating that over there? And I think it will find its ripples. And that's part of it's why I'm here in this like very uncomfortable place for me of trying something new to share these messages more, because I do see I've had so many clients over the last 15 years say to me, my marriage got better, or my divorce got better, and I raised my children. I was able to create better children. My team works better. You're the world's best kept secret. How do you get these messages out? And so right now I'm stretching into that, because I think I think it's time. I think there's so much that people are really seeking to create better workplaces where humans can thrive in healthcare and outside. I think the younger generations, as the workforce changes, are pressing us to create new ways of working. And I will tell you, I was just at a university class this week, and the young people really can see the power of these models. And so I think it helps if people are struggling with generational issues. So my hope, Marcus, is that we're creating the ripples that will grow over time. The last thing I'll say about that is the great thing about nature as a model is I'm irrelevant to it. I can plant the seed of an idea, and you can go out in your yard and get ideas and make connections all day long. So what I love is that I don't really matter in it becoming something that people can make their own.
Where's your favorite place in nature?
Well, I'm a huge fan of Zion. I think it's a really sacred, beautiful place. I love this tiny little river carved these beautiful canyons. I think it just shows the power of, kind of movement and collective way. Another
Anywhere
thing I
else?
love, yeah, I was going to say, there's something that I love about nature that I find works really well for teams. Could I share that?
Yeah, please.
And I'll share an example of this. I was working with a large healthcare system in the upper Northwest, and it was a system that was bringing together all kinds of different dimensions of healthcare under a bigger umbrella. And they were really struggling with their processes and whose part was whose part and what roles. And I shared with them, we're all familiar with the idea of a caterpillar that's ready to transform, like them in their organizations. And we know it goes into a chrysalis and it comes out a butterfly. What some people don't realize is that that caterpillar has to turn to goo. And that's often what teams feel like when they're going through change, whether they're implementing HRO or, there's a change in leadership or they've got to serve patients differently. So this system, they were going through this big change. They felt like they were goo and nobody knew where their place was. And what I said to them is, the caterpillar has to turn to goo, but inside the goo are imaginal cells. And I love that. They sound like imagination. And not one of the imaginal cells has all the answers. One understands the antenna, another understands wing, and they vibrate at a different frequency. They vibrate at the frequency of what's possible, of the future we believe in. And so what if in teams we start being the imaginal cells, and we have to find each other and communicate with each other the part of the vision we can see, and listen to each other with the kind of presence we were talking about earlier. And in that, we begin to form the butterfly. But that's not all. Like once we are formed, we have to beat our wings against that cocoon. And the more we beat our wings against the cocoon, the stronger we get to actually fly as a butterfly. And I loved this because this organization, all of a sudden, instead of having a difficult time talking about some of these changes they were going through, they could have a sense of humor and play. Oh, we're just in the goo.
Mm.
And like, what's the imaginal cell here that we really care about, that we want to bring forward? What's the reason we're coming together as these systems? What can we do for our communities we couldn't do otherwise? And what part of what we've had before is in us that's part of the blueprint of what we want to bring forward? So what I find is often when we're having difficult conversations, any part of nature, it doesn't have to be our favorite part, can give us clues and give us some distance to talk about something that's hard, and then we can bring it back to the problems that we're really trying to solve.
I can see how you can solve some problems. I like what you're doing, and I like this paradigm for leaders and staff too. So thank you for sharing all of this today. Where can people learn more about you?
So they can find me at my website. It's MaryCay Durrant.com. And we have a newsletter there for people who really want to bring these practices into their daily work and life.
Excellent. I look forward to checking out your website further. And yeah, anything else we should cover today? Because this has been really informative. I'm left with the motto of getting the goo after today's conversation. I'm wondering how I'm going to be able to implement that even better.
Well, it seems to me like you already do so much of that. And I think the only thing I would offer is to just remind people that any little step towards partnership makes a huge difference, because it's a language that few people speak, but everyone can feel.
Hmm. And I feel it from you. So thank you today for being with me, and listeners, thank you for being on this episode of Compassion and Courage: Conversations in Healthcare. Again, this is the podcast that teaches compassionate communication, provides perspective, and inspires resilience. Please visit marcusengel.com for keynote speeches, books, consulting, all of that kind of fun stuff, any area of expertise that I have. All right. Thank you all so much for being on this episode of Compassion and Courage.